All right. Hi, everyone. I've got a PowerPoint, so we are going to share my screen over here. All right. And Mike, I'm going to count on you to admit people while I do the talk.
I am doing it.
All right. Wonderful. So everyone, I'm going to ask that you hold your questions to the end. If you've got a question that occurs to you, just put a question mark in the chat, and I will call in everybody as the question marks occur in the chat at the end. So I've been asked to talk about the publishing industry in general and working with an agent specifically, which is a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to get started. So this is me. I work for the Knight Agency. I have been an agent for, as Mike said, 30 years now. My first 15 were spent with Spectrum Literary Agency in New York, and my recent 15 with the Knight Agency, which is my forever home. I'm a longtime book addict, specializing in genre fiction, particularly science fiction, fantasy, mystery, suspense, romance, and young adult fiction. My award-winning and best-selling authors include N.K. Jemisin, Alyssa Cole, Kelly Armstrong, Christina Henry, Faith Hunter, Genevieve Cogman, and others. And I've sold many, many hundreds of titles to all of the major houses and in over 35 languages. So now that I've established my credentials, I'm going to tell you a little bit about publishing. So publishing is a wonderful, soaring, and swooping business with highs and lows, just like any other. But the takeaway is that it is a business, which means that it's profit-driven. We all take it to heart because we create art, and we expect that the beauty of our creations will be enough for them to rise to the top. And I certainly hope that's so every time I fall in love with something that I want to champion. And often that is the case. If a work moves me to such an extent, there is a good chance that it's going to move others. And word of mouth is still the biggest seller of books. And an upswell of a reaction, people loving and talking about your books in Bookstagram, in TikTok, everywhere, is something that still can't be paid for or artificially inspired. But in the end, publishers are looking for something that will make them money and reach a broad readership. So in order to buy a book, not only does an editor have to love it, but they have to get second or third reads. I wish I could also put an arrow and show you all, but that's the little heart there. An editor must love it and get additional reads. People who will also love it and support the book and feel like it fits into their list, but yet isn't too close to something that they already have. Then an editor may wish to speak with the author to make sure that they're going to work well together and to make sure that they're agreeable to editorial changes that they think might be necessary. They'll also want to gather additional information for their pitch to the publisher. If you've got a track record, even if you've self-published, that's a track record. They'll want to gather additional information for their pitch to the publisher. Past sales figures, quotes, reviews, anything that you might have that might help because they're going to need that. Then they're going to run a profit and loss statement. That means that they'll estimate what your book will cost them, not just in terms of the advance, but what it's going to cost them to edit, to copy edit, to print, to format, to design, for the artwork, for the interior. And then what they think it will make them based on other books like it. If you're a debut, they're going to base it on a debut. Wherever you stand in your career, they're going to base it on another book of that standing. They're not going to base your numbers on Stephen King's numbers unless you're somebody of similar stature to Dean Koontz, even if you used him as a comp. So if things look good at that stage, if they've gotten good information, if they've gotten a good profit and loss statement, if they like, what you had to say when they talk to you, if they got good reads, then they will put together an acquisitions proposal to get out to their publishing board or acquisitions team. Okay, in advance of the meeting so that everybody will get a chance to look at that. And the acquisitions meeting will have marketing people and salespeople and subrights people and head of editorial who Bill has spoken to ahead of time about your material, so that marketability can be factored into it. Will they, if they're looking to acquire translation rights and things like that, will your book be something that will sell in the various markets? Basically, what rights do they think they can sell? How will that contribute to what your book will bring in? Will your book make enough to make it feasible for them to buy your book? And at that point, it will be decided whether they will make an offer and what size the offer will be, or whether some other book will make them more money, because it is a business. I'm sorry to say, it's a publishing business. And once the offer is made, the negotiation begins. If no offer is made, of course, your search continues. And what is right for one publisher may not be what is right for another publisher. So remember, that publisher is basing it on their experience with a particular type of book. Another publisher may have had vast success with your kind of book, where another publisher may not. So remember that publishing is not one size fits all. It never has been. And there are also many routes to publication these days. So being an agent, I'm most familiar with the traditional route, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about here. I am going to talk a little bit about self-publishing at the end, and I'm also happy to answer any questions at the end as we go along. So, can everybody see my screen, by the way? Everybody can see the screen? Okay, good. So, now, being part of a writer's group, I'm sure you're all well into your works in progress. You're all writing, you're all working. So it may be a little late for this advice, but I'm sure that you've gotten it before, and it is really good advice. Read in your chosen genre. As an agent, I see too much of people writing young adult novels where the adults do the real problem solving, or the young adults have no real agency, or face no real danger, or mysteries or thrillers where the burn is too slow, or romances where the hero and heroine are apart for too much of the book. You need to know the basic conventions of your genre. Yes, you can sometimes break them, but you need to know what they are first. And the more that you break conventions, the better you have to be at it. And usually the farther along you have to be in your career. I hear people tell me things like, oh, but Nora Roberts does it, or N.K. Jemisin does it, or something like that. Well, there are some things that you can do if you're Nora Roberts or you're N.K. Jemisin that you can't do if you're a brand new writer right out of the box, or that you can only do if you are so amazing at it that people just go, wow, I didn't think you could write a book in second person, but wow, you proved me wrong, or something. The more you break a convention, the more amazing you have to be at it. So you can do it, yes, but you are setting yourself a very, very difficult task. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but you at least have to know what the conventions are before you break them. Know your market. Okay, so yes, an agent should know your market. You don't want to go to an agent who doesn't, you write mysteries and an agent doesn't know mysteries. No, but you still need to know your own market, especially because you're going to need to know the agents you're submitting to. You're going to need to know, the houses. You should have an idea of what publishers or lines would be right for your work. Are you writing a book that would be right for Avon, for Minotaur, for Nightfire? What sort of story are you telling? Who is your audience? For your query letter, it's recommended that you have comp titles, books that are similar to yours that were published within the last 5 years. Whose readers would pick up your books as well? And that's another reason that it's good to be read within your genre. So you should know your market and your audience. It will help you target publishers, agents. It will help you write your query letter. There are so many reasons that it is good to know your market and your audience. And then you want to treat publishing like a business. First, you want to finish your work if it's a novel. Do not send out something that's unfinished. It's a little different if it's a nonfiction proposal, because that you still have to finish the proposal, but you don't have to finish the whole book. The rules for that are a little different. Or if it's a graphic novel proposal, the rules for that are a little bit more like nonfiction, but they have their own rules. But whatever it is, you want to, within the conventions of what you're writing, get it finished. You also need to make sure that you get feedback, that you have more eyes on it than just yours. You are too close to your work to see the flaws. You know what you meant to say. You don't know if you said it. You don't know if you got that across to somebody who is not in your head with you. So you need to make sure that you've got other eyes on it. Hopefully more than one set of eyes, because as you probably know from a writer's group, you go around a writer's group, 3 or 5 people all read it. They don't all say the same thing. People will have different perspectives and you want to get different feedback. And then put your work away for a while. I recommend at least 2 weeks or a month, and then come back to it with fresh eyes, look at it again, revise again. Make sure that you are working on your novel to the point at which it's as perfect as you can get it. There's no such thing as perfect. We know that, but don't just get it out because you're tired of it. Get it out because you can't look at it anymore. That's the point at which you put it away and come back to it. That point at which you just can't do it anymore. That's when, again, you put it away and come back to it fresh. Because if ever agents or editors had time to nurture a diamond in a rough, it's gone. We get so much coming at us where people have done all these steps, have done the polish step, and it's already so good that we don't have to do the diamond in the rough, and we can't, because we don't know that you can do the work, because you haven't shown us you can do the work. I've done that in the past where I've thought, oh, this is a diamond in the rough and I can take it and I can, I've worked through revising stages with an author and they just couldn't get there. So we don't know that you can get there if you haven't shown us that diamond. We don't know what it's going to look like in the end. So it's not just, oh, we're too busy or we're unwilling to put in the work. It's that you haven't shown us that you're willing to put in the work or what that work will look like in the end. Follow submission guidelines. So when you do go to query and you're looking at agents and you're looking at guidelines, follow those guidelines. You are not a special little flower. You're all special. I'm not saying that, but the reason that there are guidelines is, again, partly it shows us that you can do the work, but partly it is for our protection so that we're not getting files that might have viruses, because that's how we keep track. Well, I'll get to that, but follow the guidelines. This is the most important piece of advice. So same with your query letter. Sorry, I'm not even reading my own instructions here for panel 6. Panel 6, same with your query letter. Workshop it, make it as strong as it can be. This is an agent's introduction to you and your work, and you want to make an excellent impression. And the first rule is follow the guidelines. It is our way to see whether you're interested in us and whether you're interested in putting in the work that will be involved in the publishing process. How we keep track of our submissions. It's how we can keep our computers from catching viruses. So your query letter. So here is my general advice for query letters. Not everybody does query letters the same way. If you don't order it exactly the way I tell you to order it, nobody's going to kick you out. But this is my advice for query letters. Your query letter should be 1 page long, just like a cover letter for a job interview. If it runs onto 2 pages because you're writing fantasy or science fiction and your world building is more complex, or because you're a well-published writer and your bio runs a little long or something, that's understood. But try your best to keep it to 1 page. And usually it's just a few paragraphs long. Your opening is generally you introduce the title, the genre, the word count, and maybe your comp titles. Something like, so of course, obviously it's Dear Lucienne Diver or something. I generally recommend using somebody's full name because you don't know what pronoun somebody uses these days. You don't know. So I generally recommend using somebody's full name. But anyway, Dear Lucienne Diver, I've written an epic fantasy novel of 100,000 words entitled Gods of the Sky that I would love for you to take a look at. And then if you have comp titles, this might be the place for them. This might be Dragon Riders of Pern meets, whatever it is. So this would, well, that's an old comp. You would want something much more modern than that. But anyway, this might be the place for your comp titles. And you might explain why it would comp to this. This might have the, High Skies Adventure of this meets the whatever of that. So you might explain why these are your comp titles as well. Then you would give a summary of your work. Think the back cover copy for a novel. This would be a teaser that hits the high points of your plot and your main characters. And remember that this should intrigue us. So you don't want to boil it down to points that sound too generic. Let us know what's original, not by telling us that it's original, but by bringing the unique elements to the fore. Bio, tell us a bit about yourself. Do you have previous publications or award nominations? Did you major in a field that's relevant to your novel in some way? Did you travel to where your novel is set, or are you from there? Is there something intriguing in your background that will pique our interest? And then just close. I look forward to hearing from you. Many thanks in advance for your time is fine. Something just polite to that effect. If you've enjoyed the work of any of our authors or benefited from any of our interviews or heard us talk to your chapter, that might be something to put down. Because while we won't be swayed by flattery, we will be intrigued that you did your research, and it will again show us that you're serious. And if we've requested anything, of course, it's always important to put requested material in the subject line. You might also consider working on synopses of different lengths because sometimes different guidelines will ask for things of different lengths. So if an agent asks for 3 to 5 pages and you give them 2, chances are they're not going to throw out your query. Or if they ask for 10 and you give them, 8 or 11, they're not going to throw out your query. They're just expressing their preferences for a longer or shorter synopsis. But still do your best to follow guidelines. And yes, I described a query letter as a cover letter. And yes, agents ultimately work for an author, but it's really more like a with. It's shared risk for shared reward. An agent doesn't get paid unless you get paid. So the agent is betting that all of the time and energy they put in will pay off. And you're betting that you've gone with the right person to move your career forward. So I'm going to talk about where to find agents because you do want to do your research on the agents that you query. So it costs a bit. I think it's $25 a month or maybe $30 a month now, but I recommend joining Publishers Marketplace for the length of time that you're querying. It tells you who's selling what to who in your genre and can be a really great tool for you. So I put up some of the links here. Publishers Marketplace, Query Tracker is another good site to join, or Agent Query. Association for Authors Representatives, it has a canon of ethics. So all agents who are associated with Association of Authors Representatives have to follow the canon of ethics. Not all good agents are necessarily part of the association. For instance, we have one member agent for all of the night agency because you don't get any extra. You get the newsletter if one of your agents is a member. So there was no point in all of us being members. So right now it's Elaine Spencer for the agency. So I'm not currently a member because, again, we didn't get anything extra. You don't get a special towel or a membership pin. We don't get a secret handshake. So right now it's Elaine Spencer for the night agency. Anyway, but we subscribe to the canon of ethics, obviously. And if you don't, you get censured and there have been agents who have gotten censured for charging reading fees or expedited reading fees or anything like that. So Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America runs an author beware site, which you should all be aware of. So before you do anything, you need to know the cardinal rule that money flows to the writer. So Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America's Author Beware site tells you red flags to look for, the scams that they're aware of, tells you known bad actors, bad agencies, bad publishers. So I would definitely look them up. Look up that website, get to know the red flags, and if anything rings a bell, like maybe I should check this out, check it out. For instance, right now, somebody stole my picture and the Night Agency crest and is sending out. Now, first of all, any agent worth their salt is not sending out letters or solicitations to authors. That is a red flag right there. If you get a letter from an agent saying your book has been recommended to us, no, that is a red flag right there. Even if it doesn't say that they're asking you for money, when you call them, sure enough, somewhere along the line, it's going to be like, oh, but we can get you so many more possibilities or blast your work out there. If there is somewhere in there going to be a fee. Anyway, no reputable agent is out there soliciting more material. We have so many queries coming at us that I'm not even open to queries right now, because every time last year I opened for 10 days, and I got 750 queries in my inbox in those 10 days. I just don't have time right now. And I'm not out there soliciting. So if you see something coming at you, first of all, check the domain name. It's not our domain name. But anyway, there's just not time. So check that. If you're part of an organization like Horror Writers of America or Mystery Writers of America, anything like that, they will likely have a list of agents with accredited sales in your field. So that's another good place to look for reputable agents. So you found amazing agents, you send your work out, you will inevitably get rejections, and most of them are going to be form rejections. Don't get discouraged. It's just because agents get so many queries, they can't possibly write personal responses to everything. We wouldn't have time to do anything else. So most of us have timelines listed that we try to respond within. We don't always make it. Remember that we're not only reading queries, we're reading our author materials. We're reading proposals from our authors, revisions to those proposals, manuscripts from clients, sometimes rush reads, contracts full of legalese, you name it, we're working on it. So we just have so much going on behind the scenes that we don't have time to write personal rejections to everything. And not all writers even appreciate it. When I first got in the business, I wanted to help as many people as possible. I wrote as many personal rejections as I could, and people would take time to argue with me. And that really put me off writing personal rejections. So really, some people ruin it for everybody, but really, you just can't take time to do it. And if somebody does write you a personal rejection, take it as gold, okay? So I recommend sending things out widely at first. At the query stage, nobody expects that they're getting a single submission. If you are asked for one later, an exclusive submission or a single submission, it's up to you whether you do that. Usually, if somebody is asking you for an exclusive, they're also offering that they will look at it in a brief period of time, giving you the courtesy of a quick response for, hold on 1 second. Sorry, I have family staying with me and they have the TV on very, very loud down there. I did not know they were going to be staying with me when I agreed to do this talk. But anyway, it's up to you. They will usually, if you agree to give them your manuscript for an exclusive, they will agree to read it within a very short time. Or, you know, you can just say, look, I have it out with other people. I really don't want to hold it up. Would you still be willing to take a look? And usually they will, they just might not get to it as quickly. So you don't have to necessarily grant the single, but more and more people are not necessarily counting on a single. But again, if you hear anything personal, take it as golden. And while your work is out, work on something new. Don't fret and work yourself up. Work on something new, preferably unrelated to the other thing, because you don't want to be working putting all your eggs in one basket on book 2 when book 1 hasn't sold, unless you are willing to self-publish if this doesn't work out, or really set it aside, because sometimes that first project that you're working on is your learning experience. A lot of people don't publish till 6 books down the line, or, I remember, listening to many of my heroes talk about, having 6 books under the bed. This was back in the manuscript days before everything was electronic, like really that would never see the light of day, or, and that is perfectly fine. I think some days now we all rush because we have the option of self-publishing without thinking about whether something necessarily should see the light of day, or whether you will learn from later manuscripts and go back and look and go, oh yeah, maybe really it was good that didn't come out when it did. So, I mean, think about that too. It might really be your learning experience, because a lot of things are, and you may even go back to it later with fresh eyes and what you know now and do a much better job with it. So, let's see. So we've talked about how to get an agent. Let's talk about why you need one, because we didn't even cover that. So first of all, if you are going to a major house, you do need an agent, because most of the major houses do not even look at unsolicited or unagented material. Some might have brief open submission periods, but they will get flooded during those brief open submission periods, and you still will be waiting probably longer than if you had an agent looking at it. A lot of agents work editorially. Not all agents are editorial agents, so that's something I want to find out. But agents will work editorially to make your work as strong as it can possibly be before it goes out and sees the editorial eye. They come to you with market knowledge. They know who is buying what and who is strongest in what at that time. We know who takes really long to answer and who doesn't, who's crazy about dual timeline stories and who really can't stand them, who's away on sabbatical. We know all the scuttlebutt, or at least we do our best to keep on top of it. We get your work in front of editors, and we get it the attention it deserves, because in general, we have the respect in the business. They know we've had successes. They know we've found good people in the past. And so generally, when we put something in front of them, they think that we have a pretty good chance of having discovered another new talent. And that gets them reading. Then we have the negotiation skills. We've done it before. We have a pretty good idea what publishers are willing to give on and where they're willing to give and where they're not. One publisher may be willing to give separate accounting, one may not, but they may be willing to give somewhere else in a contract. Also, the exploitation of subrights. If you hold on to your translation rights, do you know how to do it, how to exploit the rights in France and Japan and everything else? Well, we have subrights we work with all over the world, and we'll be able to do that for you, as well as we work with film agents. And we work with audio houses. We work with all different kinds of people to get your subrights exploited. And we play bad cop if we have to chase down a contract or a check, or you don't like your something about your cover or something. We can talk with the publishers, and generally we're still pretty friendly about it. I say bad cop, but we very rarely have to, break out a billy club. So we're really generally very friendly with the publishers. But we can put it in less emotional terms and more businessy terms and deal with it that way. Okay. And we, back on that last panel, we also help you make informed decisions. So when we're talking about those deals, we're telling you that this publisher might, do this over that publisher. We're talking about the pros and cons of working with the various publishers. Okay. Oh, let's go back to that last panel for a second. So whether we get you established at a major or a mid-sized press or even a small press, all of that is the same, negotiating and exploiting subrights and all of that. So whatever kind of contract you're looking at, whether it's large press, small press, whatever, I still recommend working with an agent. And if not an agent, then a publishing lawyer or an intellectual properties lawyer. And I'm very specific about that because not just any lawyer is going to understand publishing and publishing language. It is a very specific thing and very different than any other kind of contract. I've seen contracts that were looked over by other kinds of lawyers, and they've changed things that absolutely didn't need to be changed and left things that absolutely should have been changed because they really didn't know what to do with a publishing contract. So that is very, very important. And you don't ever want to get into a situation where you give too much away, like your copyright, or are in a situation where you're unable to get your rights back. So I've talked a lot about traditional publishing now, and I did promise that I would get to self-publishing. So sorry, I was on that a little bit too soon. But now let me go over some tips for self-publishing. So again, I'm not the pro here, but here are my 2 cents. And this path is just as valid as any other, as long as, again, you treat it like a business. So make sure that your work is truly ready. And that means that you have gotten an editor. Because again, you're going to be too close to your work to see any flaws, to see if you said what you meant to say, and to make sure that everything works, that there's no inconsistencies, that everything really is smooth, pacing, plotting, everything. And make sure that you've gotten a copy editor. Make sure that basically you've had other eyes on it, and that everything that it takes a professional for, you've gotten a professional for. Because it does take a village, okay? And anything that you can't do yourself, you paid for. Also, formatting, if you can't format it, cover design, you need to get an ISBN, especially if you're planning on printing, anything like that. Website design, if you're not a website designer. So make sure that you treat it professionally, and that you do everything like a professional writer, because you are going to be judged on this, especially if you one day do want to be traditionally published and you're building a track record. Most publishers who are successful in the self-publishing field have a high yield, which means that they bring out books frequently. They are fast. I don't know how they do it. I have no idea how they do it and keep up their quality, but they publish quickly. And they have readers coming back and back to them rather than wandering off to others. They learn how to market themselves, what strategies work. So you would really need to do your research, be willing to pay for ads, invest in yourself if you want to make this your business. So because I am not the expert on this, I have a link for you down below from Writer Magazine that talks a little bit more about these steps. And I would really recommend that if you do decide to go into self-publishing, if you decide to self-publish, that you do look and find out all of the steps, and particularly find out where to invest in yourself. And there are self-publishing gurus out there who can help you with where to do this. And some self-published authors have agents for their subrights. Although this can be difficult to get unless you're really successful in this field. And those agents will market their translation rights or film and television or audio, and then sometimes get them traditional deals for some of their series while they continue to self-publish others. Authors who self-publish and traditionally publish are generally referred to as hybrid authors. And there you have it. That is my quick talk 37 minutes later, on publishing and agents. I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for questions and to find out what you all wanted to hear. So I've got a link up there for the Knight Agency website, because some of the Knight Agency agents are open to queries at this time, and also my author website in case you want to check out any of my books. But let me make sure that you all have the links, and then I'm going to go look over at my chat. Okay, I'm going to give you another 2-3 seconds on that, and then I'm going to stop sharing so that I can go look at chat, or maybe I could do that even now and see who had questions. Okay, so just Okay, I see Richard Spencer. Is that the first question? Oh, wait. Okay, the first question was Bobby Pronan. If you got 700 submissions in 10 days, how do we stand a chance of ever getting our query submission read? Okay, so Bobby, that was not everybody's going to get 700 submissions in 10 days. That was because people were poised for me to reopen. So that is not a typical rate of submissions for queries. That was because I had been closed for so long and people had been poised and waiting for me to reopen. We do get a lot of queries. I won't lie that we do get a lot of queries. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what my typical rate is. It's high, but not that high. But in many cases, we hear nothing, not even a form rejection. I don't like that approach. But I think the agents who don't respond if not interested, I think they tell you that. I don't know why they go about that process. I guess because it's easier for them. I think it's polite to at least let people know if you're not interested, because otherwise there's no closure on that at all. There are probably times when I've missed responding to somebody as well. And there are probably people out there still cursing my name for that, and I feel terrible. But, you know, and things can get missed. So that can happen. But I would not say 700 queries in 10 days is a normal rate of submission by any means. And how do you stand a chance? I still have taken on people from queries. I still have. One of my recent successes was Vaishnavi Patel, whose Kaiki was she hit the New York Times bestseller list with her debut novel. And she was from my queries. She didn't come to me knowing one of my clients or through any other way than strictly through my query inbox when I was open to queries. So you still can get noticed and can get attention that way. Absolutely. So let me see. Okay, I'm going to stop the share on this now and go back to this view and go to my chats. So Richard Spencer, you had a question. Do you want to type your question down below?
Yes. Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay. I've just self-published my first book.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any advantages to being self-published if you're looking at going the traditional route?
Only if you've had a really successful track record. If you can show that you've sold tens of thousands of books, or hundreds of thousands of books, or then yes, then you can tell us that you've had a very successful time self-publishing, and if you have all these reviews on your page and you're above you're 3.8 stars or above, or if you've had a really successful track record that you can show us, then yes. Other than that, there's not really an advantage to having gone that route first.
Well, does it hurt you to go that way first?
It doesn't necessarily hurt you unless you've had a really negative, if we go and we see a lot of things that say your book was poorly copy edited, or if we see a lot of negatives, then it might hurt you, to be honest. And you don't want to go to agents and editors with a book that's already been self-published. You want to approach them with something new. Okay, let's see. Next question. I've heard that it's extremely difficult to convince a publisher to take a series. Part of that series has already been self-published. Teresa, yes, that is true. That is true. You want to approach us with something new. Are there exceptions, such as a series composed of standalone books? If it really stands absolutely alone, but you're really better off approaching agents and editors with something that's brand new. I mean, if the book does stand entirely alone and you don't have to have read all the any of the other books, then there's a chance, but usually usually you really do want to approach an editor with something that is brand new. But I would say if really a book stands completely alone from a series, you've got a better chance. So it depends. I don't want to discourage you. There are always exceptions to rules. So I would say if you really feel strongly and believe in it, then give it a shot. How do you know when to give up looking for an agent? You only give up, your journey only ends when you give up. So I would say if you've sent out 100, 130 submissions on a particular project, I would maybe move on to a different project. I wouldn't give up looking for an agent. I would move on to the next project, or at 50 submissions, maybe even before, just go to workshop your query and go to people and say, hey, my query isn't getting bites, or my partial isn't getting bites. Maybe let's workshop this again and maybe see where I'm going wrong with this, or maybe how I can make it more attractive to agents, and maybe reworkshop what it is that you're submitting. But remember that your journey only ends when you give up. So I don't know that give up is a word that I would use. I persevere is one of my biggest pieces of advice. And if not this project, then maybe the next one. And like I said, if something isn't working, I would say workshop it. And maybe it's just not right. Maybe it's a draft away from being the draft, or maybe it's 2 drafts away, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a project away. Maybe it's not this novel or this idea. I'm currently adapting my book to screenplays. Finding an agent. Hold on, I've got 2 screens, so my mouse doesn't always want to. I'm currently adapting my book to screenplays. Finding an agent has been impossible. Okay, so you're looking for a so Jolene, are you looking for a screenplay agent or a book agent? Is the question about screenplay agents?
It's about screenplay agents, and I'm wondering, do literary agents ever read screenplay submissions?
No, literary agents don't read screenplay submissions, and screenplay agents are incredibly difficult to get because if you're not known, screenplays are extremely difficult. I understand from my book to film agent, because one of my authors asked me about repping screenplays, and that's what he told me, is that they're very difficult, a very difficult proposition. I don't know any advice on screenplays. I'm so sorry, because that's not my field. I only know from him that yes, it is really tough. But a screenplay agent is completely different from a literary agent, and completely different from a book to film agent. And I work with book to film agents, so I don't even know anything about screenplay agents. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Am I my own agent? No, I would be a terrible agent for me. I'm so insecure about my own writing, it's ridiculous. No, I have an agent who is not me. Is it good to query all one's top choice of agents at once, or do you do it in stages as feedback rolls in? Everything is a strategy. That is a very, very good question, because sometimes you might want to hold back, because if you're not getting the response, then you can workshop it and maybe send it out again. I always say shoot for the moon, but then, you might want to wait for feedback to roll in, but then who do you go to first, and then maybe not get, I really don't know. My best advice is workshop to the best of your ability before you ever send it out, and then go to your top choices right from the beginning. Just make sure it's the very best it can be. Make sure you've workshopped it and had eyes on it, and feel really confident before you go out. And then shoot for the moon. I mean, that's my advice. How long does it typically take for an agent to read a manuscript once it's requested? That really depends on the agent. for me, I try to read it within a month once it's requested, but if I have a whole bunch of rush reads land on my desk, it could take longer. If I've just cleared my desk, it could be a week. That's rare. It's really rare. But and some agents, I know it's longer than that. It just really all depends. Could I recommend a good intellectual publishing lawyer? I mean, I know of some. Mary Langer Thompson. I don't know how much they cost. I mean, I know of some. I could probably give you a list of a few. Write to me at lucienne.diver@nightagency.net, and I'll try and give you a list tomorrow. But again, I don't know what they cost. Lloyd Jansen is somebody we've used. That's who comes to me off the top of my head, Lloyd Jansen. I think his website's copylaw.org. That's somebody we've used, but again, I don't know what he costs, but I know that he's somebody that we've used. Oh, John Garner. Yep, I hope I didn't miss you. You're welcome. What type of release is needed when using pictures in your book of famous and non-famous people? You need a photo. You need a permissions from the person who took the picture, from whoever is the copyright holder of the photograph. So you would need to write to the copyright holder of the photographer. So yeah, I'm sure you can find a template for that online, but then you would have to get that from the photographer, and they may very well charge a fee for that. Am I correct in assuming no agent or publisher will be interested in a book if it's part of a series previously published through a vanity press? Yeah, there's a good chance that somebody won't be interested in something that was previously published through a vanity press because it's been previously published. Usually, I mean, I can't speak for smaller regional presses, but even so, probably if something has been previously published, it's considered previously published, and it's, I mean, I don't know how much a vanity publisher would have gotten it out there, but it still will have a record and a previous ISBN, and there may be complications with getting things off Amazon or other things, and duplicate pages and grief that people don't want to worry about. How is the agency dealing with the influx of AI submissions? I haven't been open to submissions, so I don't know. The agency hasn't mentioned that they're seeing it. I know a lot of magazines have had to close their submissions because of AI. I mean, there are submissions portals, things like that, because of AI submissions. I can't even imagine the headache it's going to be going forward. All I can say is don't do it. Friends don't let friends do AI submissions. It's, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. I'm sure we're going to get them. I am also imagine they're easily identifiable because they're terrible. But yeah, I mean, they're going to crash inboxes. I can't even imagine. Let's see. Let's see. Are you more or less interested in a book that is similar in topic to one that has been a good seller? I mean, it's all about the idea. You can have 5 books that have a similar topic, but completely different approaches, or some turn things on their head, or combine them in completely unique ways, or whatever. So I'm not necessarily more or less interested in a book that's similar in topic. I mean, if it's too similar, then I'm not interested, because it's going to be too similar and there's not going to be enough way to distinguish it in the market. But if it's similar but a complete 180, or it's similar but it's it stands things on its head. I'm always interested in a book that stands something on its head, or subverts expectations, or comes at things from a fresh angle. I absolutely love subverting expectations. So if something can subvert my expectations, then I'm all for it. Oh, I'm the photographer. I took all the pictures that I'll use. Oh, behind the scenes on a movie set. Oh, behind the scenes on a movie set. Well, then you need to get a model clearance. Then you'll need a different type of then what you need is a model clear. Again, this isn't my area of expertise, the clearance, Mary Ruth Hughes, but you should again be able to find a model release form on online or something. But you'll need to have you'll need to get permission from the model, and if it's a movie set, you might even need permission from the film people. But if you're there and they let you take pictures, then but you might even need something from the studio giving you permission to use the photos from a movie set. But you also need model release forms. You should be able to find a standard form online that you can use. But again, that's not my area of expertise. I would look up an article or something, because that's not necessarily my area. People that are dead, well, they won't be able to give you permission. Yeah, in that case, I would just go to the studio, and there might be a statute of limitations. I don't know. That's not really my area. So I'm not sure about that. Oh, hundreds of studios. Oh my goodness. I would say if you have those, I would see if there's any kind of statute of limitations. I don't know. It's not really my area. I'm sorry. Yeah, nonfiction and that kind of thing, and photo releases isn't my area. So any other questions? We've got 5 minutes left. Does anybody need me to post the links again? Anything like that? No?
I wrote down the links and I'll put them in our newsletter.
Okay.
I have one question. How did you actually become an agent? What happened to you?
Well, I was an anthropology and writing double major, and I always wanted to be in publishing, actually. And when I graduated college, I applied to jobs in publishing, and I applied to graduate school for forensic anthropology. And my interests clashed, actually, because I went to my interview at Spectrum Literary Agency reading a book by Ken Goddard, who headed up the National Fish and Wildlife Forensic Lab in Ashland, Oregon. And when I went for the interview, reading one of his books, and I went in to talk to Eleanor Wood, I'm talking to her in her office, and I see his book on her shelf, and I went, wait a minute, I'm reading that. And it's wonderful. And she represented him, as it turned out. And we had a great talk from there on about books and, mysteries and thrillers and science fiction and everything else. And I got the job because I loved books and I loved her kinds of books, and other people had more experience. I mean, I worked on the college magazine and the anthropological magazine and various things and everything. I mean, I had experience, but I mean, other people had more publishing experience, but I got the job because I was reading Ken Goddard's book about a team of National Fish and Wildlife forensic agents solving crimes. And so that was how I got my first job in publishing. And so I started out as a literary assistant. And after a while, I worked my way up to being an agent.
Thank you.
I have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
How much work is the author expected to do or required to do if an agent is interested in their book and it does look like a publisher's going to pick it up?
Well, if a publisher the publisher looks like they're going to pick it up, they don't do any work ahead of that because they'll already have done work yet. The agent will already have asked them to revise before the submission process. And it goes out on the submission process. And then an editor will probably talk to the author before they make an offer or whatever, and they'll discuss, oh, well, I think it might need this work or whatever to see if the author's amenable. But rarely does the author go do that work before they take it on. But once the publisher makes the offer and the contract is done and everything, then they'll get an editorial letter from the editor. So it's once they're under contract, they'll then be revising, and
But
doing.
I was more specifically thinking about marketing. Are we required to have our own websites and do our own social media and set up our own book signings and do all that kind of stuff?
Oh, you will have to have a website and things like that and do a certain amount of that. I mean, the publisher will do a certain amount of marketing and all of that, but you will be required to have a website at the very least. And it's really highly recommended that you have some social media presence because, nobody can talk about your books like you can, but so it's really recommended that you start building a social media presence from the time that you start looking for an agent, really, or the time that you start even sending out the time you even start thinking about getting published. It's recommended. And it's a good idea anyway to start following people in publishing and getting a sense of how publishing works and things like that. And you'll get tips along the way. And, it's a good idea anyway. But a publisher will set up some signings for you and things like that. Although these days a lot of it will be online and things like that, because as a debut author, to be honest, probably you won't have a lot of people showing up at your first signing, things like that, yeah, I mean, you won't be required to do all of it all by yourself. A publisher will get involved and do a lot of that. But yes, you will at very minimum have to have a website, things like that, because people will want to know where to find you and when your next book is coming out and things like that.
Thanks.
Very good.
I
It
don't
is.
know if I'm sorry. I was just going to throw out one more just before we close. The question on everybody's mind right now, and if you could just give us your thoughts on AI and what that's going to mean for publishing and writers and books.
Well, I mean, right now, I think AI nobody really knows except that it's not going to take over anything anytime soon. I mean, it's first of all, it's terrible. I mean, it's much more for writing business letters, things like that. I mean, if you've ever seen anything written by an AI, it's not anything you want to read. And all agents and things like that are pushing to get it into publishing contracts. And some publishers don't know what language to put in yet and are pushing back on it. And some publishers are putting language in. And so we're working on it, and we're working on dealing with language to deal with it. So, it's something that we're working on developing language for as it develops. So are you going to see AI written books anytime soon from major houses replacing authors, things like that? No. So I can assure you of that. But right now publishers use, AI in terms of determining keywords, determining metadata, things like that. So that's part of the reason that it's a struggle to figure out how to word the language, how to use the language, because they can't say that they're not going to use AI entirely because it's already part of, like I said, what they use for metadata. And there's a certain amount of AI use that is already part of our world that is inextricably entwined with our world. But are we going to see computers writing books? No. Are we going to see computers writing books 50 years in the future when they figure out a way to make them indistinguishable from humans? Well, I mean, that I don't think so either, because they've been predicting for all this time that we were going to see, computer simulations that are indistinguishable from actors. And we haven't seen that either, because it's just whole uncanny valley territory that nobody's been able to cross. If we cross it, well, then we all have something to fear. But I mean, we haven't. So, and we're dealing with the language in the meantime, and we'll get to dealing with the language before we ever hit the uncanny valley territory.
And it just gives us more, if I can add, it also gives us more reason to be excellent at our own writing and to make it something of quality that will not be able to be reproduced by an AI.
Right, because also an AI is never going to be able to do the depths of empathy and the rip your heart out and the beautiful language and the, because like I said, the biggest seller of books is word of mouth. And do you think an AI is ever going to be something that you take to your heart and tell all your friends, an AI written thing and tell all your friends about, and that everybody has to read, like, something like Lessons in Chemistry, like something like, which yes, made you laugh, but also made you cry and made you hurt and made you, or that, anyway, these things that, are AI can't write that. Can't.
Right. Well, we are a little past our time. I want to thank Lucienne for joining us tonight. Everybody, let's give her an applause. Appreciate so much you being willing to do this.
Thank you.
This has been recorded and will most likely be on our YouTube channel. And I will write up a summary for our newsletter too. Thank you so much, Lucienne. You did a fantastic job tonight. Very informative. I can't believe how much you packed into 1 hour.
I do my best. All right. Thank you all for being here.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Good night.